Welcome to the club! Hello everyone! We are glad to see all of you who decided to join us. And today we are starting to discuss a new book. What book is it?
It's one of my favorite books, at least it used to be one of my favorite books, Pride and Prejudice. And
yes.
I'm very happy that we're going to discuss it because I know that I will like it for sure.
Okay, great. And as usual, when we start discussing a new book, today we're going to discuss some interesting facts from the author's biography a little bit. Then we share the summary of the chapters we discussed today. And today we discuss chapters from 1 till 17. And after that, we discuss something interesting from the chapters that we think worth discussing. And after that, as usual, we end up with the vocabulary, with the interesting vocabulary from these chapters. So, the author is Jane Austen. Frankly speaking, I understand that she was born quite a long time ago and she wrote her books also quite a long time ago, but still when I saw that she was born in 1775, I was like, that is, wow, very long ago. So, what is interesting? Of course, she is a British author. Her older sister, Cassandra, I found interesting the following, that her older sister, her name is Cassandra Elizabeth Austen, and she is Jane Austen. Jane Austen doesn't have second name. Usually it is quite a popular thing for people in America and in England to have like second names. So Cassandra Elizabeth Austen has a second name, but Jane had only a single name. And what is interesting that in Pride and Prejudice, two main sisters are also called Elizabeth and Jane. But Jane is older in the story, and in reality, Jane was younger than Cassandra Elizabeth. I just found it quite interesting because it is also mentioned that Cassandra and Jane were very close and they were friends, as it is also happens with the characters in Pride and Prejudice. Besides the Pride and Prejudice that we're going to read, Jane Austen wrote Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park, Emma, for example.
I found an interesting thing that the way these books were published, because those times it was not a common thing to publish books if you are a woman, so to write books if you are a woman. That's why they were published anonymously. She didn't gain a lot of recognition for her works, of course, because no one knew her name, and she was not so popular in her lifetime. But when they published Sense and Sensibility, it became quite popular, and then the next novel, which was Pride and Prejudice, was published without a name again, but it was said like from the author of Sense and Sensibility.
It's both quite interesting and a little bit sad. Have you read any other books by her?
Well, I have read Sense and Sensibility and Emma. Well, actually, I have these two books, but I think that I didn't finish one of them, and I do not remember which one, because they are really quite close to each other.
Quite similar.
Yes, the plots are really similar, well, to my mind.
Yes.
So it's all about the same thing, like about women who were not the ordinary ones, who had some deep thoughts and so on and so forth, and about rich men who found these women interesting somehow after not liking this very woman at the first sight. So something like that. That's why for me, when I read Pride and Prejudice, I was impressed, and I read it 2 or 3 times in Russian because it was like time of my university, and I was fond of love novels, and I read a lot of them, like Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, Vanity Fair, Thornbirds, what else? Well, a lot of them. Yes, and I really enjoyed them.
I agree that they are quite the same. Today I brought the book in English that I'm reading now, and also the book in Russian. I think I bought the book in Russian also when I was at the university, but it seems to me that I haven't read this book in Russian. I don't know why, just because this book looks like it wasn't opened. I enjoy a lot the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth. I was crazy in love with him at those times, and I have a DVD also of this mini-series, and I'm going to rewatch it for sure when we are going to end the book. Sense and Sensibility, have you watched it?
No, I haven't watched this one with Colin Firth.
No?
I watched only the film with Keira Knightley.
Oh my God!
Yes, I know that a lot of people prefer this version. I know it, but it's a series, right?
It's a series.
That's why probably
it's a series, but it's a short series,
Yeah,
like maybe
mini-series.
3 episodes or something like that. But they are long. They are like movies. And I haven't watched with Keira Knightley, the one with Keira Knightley. I only watched this Pride and Prejudice because every time when I want to rewatch it, I want to go back to that very version. Yes, because I like it a lot. And Sense and Sensibility, I think we also watched it when I was at the university, and there is Alan Rickman. Yes, there is Alan Rickman, there is Kate Winslet, and there is Emma Thompson in this version.
Cool.
Yes, cool cast, and the movie is very nice. I really recommend watching it, but I haven't read Sense and Sensibility. I only watched the adaptation. And I haven't watched or read any other of her books, especially because I also thought that they are going to be quite the same. And if I enjoy Pride and Prejudice, I would prefer to reread Pride and Prejudice. I don't know why. It's just a thing with me, I think.
Well, as for me, I haven't read this novel in English. I don't know why. Just
Pride and Prejudice?
Yes, we didn't have this book at our university. We had it only literature in Russian, so
Yes.
to say, like American and English literature, but in Russian.
Yeah.
We had a long list of many books, and yes, so there we read it, but not in our home reading course.
As you have mentioned, it was quite very difficult for women to write at those times and to have like a writing career, because they said that it might be a hobby, but
Not a full-time job.
yes, not a full-time job. Women were
Meant to have kids.
women were meant to get married, to have kids. It was like praised and it was expected of women, and that's why even if you couldn't get married, you couldn't be very much respected for being an author for a woman. But there is also one interesting fact that at some point Jane Austen learned that Prince Regent admired her novels and kept a set at each of his residences. Can you imagine that even though such a person as Prince Regent liked her novels, she couldn't be published under her own name? This is something really strange for me.
Yeah, sounds ridiculous.
Yes.
But it's just for us because we live in the modern world.
Yes, I mean, so you mentioned that you liked it a lot when you read it in Russian. And frankly speaking, now when I started to read it in English, most probably for the second time, I'm really afraid that I might not dislike it, but I might be very much emotional about many things, because at the university I was very young and I also liked novels about love, and I didn't pay too much attention to the things that I paid attention to now. Because ever since those times I've changed a lot and I've read many psychological books, and the times are very different now. That's why I think I'm going to be a little bit or not a little bit upset about some things, but still we're going to discuss it later.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Jane Austen lived only 41 years. She died when she was 41 due to some illness. The historians, the biographers are not very sure what exact illness it was. And of course, it's a sad thing that such a talented author had such a short life and didn't get a lot of fame when she lived. There is also a mention that after her death, her books were never out of publish ever since. And many countries studied these books during school program, and just on the whole, many people enjoy her books. Anything else to add about her?
No, but maybe 40 years for those times were
Not
not
too
too
little.
short,
Not too little.
not a short life, yes. But at the same time, I think that somewhere in this book I saw a phrase like she was quite a young woman, only 35 years old, and
Yes.
I thought what? Because
Yes.
in Russian literature, 35 is an old woman, really. So if we take books like which are 200 years
Yes,
old,
yes, I understand.
yeah, so that is crazy.
And also, you mentioned that Jane Austen published Pride and Prejudice after Sense and Sensibility, but in fact she wrote or started writing Pride and Prejudice before Sense and Sensibility when she was only 21 years old. That is also quite an interesting fact. Okay, let's start with a summary of this episode, will you please?
One day in Longbourn, Mrs. Bennet shares some news with her husband, Mr. Bennet. A wealthy gentleman has moved to a nearby estate. She has plans to marry him to one of their 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Kitty, Mary and Lydia. Mr. Bennet and Mr. Bingley met, and Mr. Bingley has business in town. He returns with his sisters and Mr. Darcy. The ladies observe that Mr. Darcy is rich and attractive, but too proud. He makes his own comments on Elizabeth that she is not handsome enough for his taste, turning down Bingley's suggestion that he ask her to dance. Jane tells Elizabeth that she admires Bingley and that she enjoys his sister's company. Miss Bingley, the unmarried of his sister, will live with him in Netherfield, and the friendship between Darcy and Bingley is revealed to be rather deep. Elizabeth discusses Mr. Darcy with her best friend, Charlotte. They talk about his pride and how rude he was to Elizabeth. The Bennet sisters start spending more time with Mr. Darcy, begins to show a bit more interest in Elizabeth. He begins to find her much more interesting, and when he willingly takes her hand to dance at another party, she turns him down. The 2 youngest Bennet sisters, Kitty and Lydia, visit their aunt, Mrs. Phillips, in Meryton. There is a military base in Meryton, and the 2 become acquainted with the officers. Jane is invited to Netherfield to have supper with Miss Bingley and Mr. Hurst and Mr. Bingley. In the course of the 3-mile ride, Jane is soaked by the rain and gets a cold. Elizabeth visits her to check on her health and ends up staying there with her sister.
Yes, I will continue. Elizabeth spends most of her time at Netherfield with Jane. When they all eat dinner together or sit in the drawing room, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst are polite to Elizabeth, but when Elizabeth is gone, they make fun of her family and the fact that she walked to Netherfield. Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy like Elizabeth, though. The next day, Mrs. Bennet, Kitty and Lydia visit Netherfield to see Jane. Elizabeth is embarrassed by their behavior. Lydia reminds Mr. Bingley about his promise to have a ball. Mr. Bingley agrees to have a ball as soon as Jane gets better. That evening at Netherfield, Elizabeth changes Darcy's views and he finds her attractive, but their social differences prevent him from pursuing her. Darcy is troubled by his attraction to Elizabeth and decides to pay less attention to her. Jane and Elizabeth are eager to go home, but their mother doesn't want to send a carriage. They borrow Bingley's carriage and leave Netherfield on Sunday, 5 days after Jane arrived. Mrs. Bennet is upset by their quick departure, but Mr. Bennet is glad to have them back. A visitor named William Collins arrives at Bennet's house. He is Mr. Bennet's cousin and the inheritor of Longbourn when Mr. Bennet dies. Because the property can only go to a male, Collins will get it. Feeling obliged to the Bennet family because of the inheritance, Mr. Collins plans to propose to one of the Bennet daughters. They go to Meryton, where they encounter George Wickham, a handsome officer. Elizabeth notices that Wickham and Darcy have a connection, but they don't acknowledge each other. The next day, they dine with Mr. Phillips, and Wickham reveals to Elizabeth that Darcy mistreated him. Elizabeth believes Wickham's story and shares it with Jane. Despite Jane's doubts, Elizabeth is certain that Wickham is telling the truth. Bingley invites them to a ball at Netherfield, and Mr. Collins asks Elizabeth to dance the first 2 dances with him. So what are your overall impressions about this part?
Well, I liked it. Nothing changed. I still like the story. Yes, of course, I agree that we all changed from university years. And yes, of course, our perception of life also changed somehow, maybe changed completely in some points. But generally, my emotions are quite similar to those that I had years before. I do not like some of the characters, so I think that when I was younger and then I was reading this book, I liked Elizabeth Dad because I thought that he is a nice person and he just loves Elizabeth because she is a good girl and she has some nice thoughts, some deep thoughts in comparison with her sisters.
Yes.
But in fact, now I do not like this man just because it's not okay to tell your daughters like you're stupid ones.
Yes.
That is so strange for me.
Definitely.
Well, for now it is the only change of my attitude.
On the whole, I also enjoy the story in this part, but from my memories, it seemed to me that in the book, the fact that Darcy likes Elizabeth is going to appear quite late. I don't know why, but in fact, he started to like her like maybe in the 5th chapter or something like that. It was a little bit unexpected for me. I remember quite well the adaptation, and for now the events are quite close to what is shown there. It was a little bit surprising for me that he started to like her that soon. I thought there should be kind of like a long development of this storyline, but in fact no. Though of course I like it, that it's in the early stage. You are over-scrupulous, surely. I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie. I was like, what? Okay, so he thinks that his daughters are stupid, and he doesn't even care who they like. It's like he thinks of his daughters as some kind of products that has some expiry date, and he should find a buyer as soon as possible. Still, of course, Mr. Darcy is a favorite character for many people, though let's talk a little bit still about the situation when they meet with Elizabeth for the first time and how he behaves. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that, unlucky for him, these comments were heard by Elizabeth herself. Well, of course, it's not the best idea to judge people just by their appearance and not knowing anything about them. Still, he got to know her and he liked her, he changed his opinion. That's why I do not have any negative reaction to this. Of course, it was not polite to say these things and in front of other people.
Okay, what I wanted to draw your attention to. First impression can only be done once. And because Elizabeth's first impression of Darcy was made thanks to his rude comments, the development of the story is going to be very much connected with it, because we see, of course, Darcy is described as a very proud man, but in fact Elizabeth is also very proud. though she doesn't mention it a lot, but her pride has been hurt. And even though Darcy kind of like changes his behavior later, she still doesn't want to give him a second chance. And she is like, he is bad, and he is this, and he is that. Of course, I can say that if I would hear something like this about myself, I would also prefer at least not to talk or not to communicate with such a person. But of course I understand that here it is done on purpose, because if the first impression would be good, the story would be very short.
Yes, there would be no story at all.
There would be no story, I agree.
I like the moment when Jane Austen describes like development of Darcy's feelings to Elizabeth, and he started noticing that she is actually a beautiful person. I can't say that he is confused with his first impression, so he doesn't say anything about it, but he says something like the phrase, but no sooner had he made it clear to himself and his friends that she had hardly a good feature in her face, then he began to find it was rendered uncommonly intelligent by the beautiful expression of her dark eyes. And I just love such small details, and I love that he notices some parts that kind of express her personality, because I really can relate to this point of view. And as I am a Doctor Who fan, strange to mention it here, but they had such a nice scene with Rory and Amy, when Amy said, like, sometimes we meet people who are very ordinary, so nothing special about them, and you just say, okay, they're not bad, but nothing special. But then you get to know each other and you understand how beautiful these people are inside, and you start noticing that their appearance becomes them, like, and you can see the beauty in their appearance, just seeing the beauty of their inside. And this phrase is such a cool one, and I really love rewatching this scene. I think I watched it a million times, because it happened to me several times in my life, when I thought that I do not thought that this person was ugly or something, or not handsome enough for me, but just I didn't pay too much attention to appearance. But then I kind of started noticing that really this appearance is perfect for this person.
I also wanted to discuss with you when Elizabeth talked to Charlotte. So Charlotte is one of her best friends. So her best friend, I think, is Jane, but Charlotte is also Elizabeth's friend, and they discuss, of course, everything together. There are a couple of thoughts from Charlotte that I would like to read and discuss. So the first one is, there is so much of gratitude or vanity in almost every attachment that it is not safe to leave any to itself. We can all begin freely. A slight preference is natural enough, but there are very few of us who have heart enough to be really in love without encouragement. In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had better show more affection than she feels. Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on. What do you think about it?
Well, I think there is some sense in her words, actually, because it is just strange to keep all our emotions inside, because we cannot read our minds and we do not know if we are liked by other people or not. That's why it's really better to show some emotions if you like a person, or to kind of encourage him or her to communicate with you. Yes, but I, as a very restricted person myself, I can totally understand Jane, because I can't show emotions in a lot of situations. I don't know how it happens. I can't control myself. I just show some emotions, but they are not the ones that I really feel, because sometimes people tell me that when I first met you, you were so serious, and I thought you were mean, but I thought, what a nice person, actually. So in my head, my thoughts were completely different. It's just my face, so it happens in life.
And what about the idea that a woman should be a secret and men like to unveil the secrets of a woman for himself?
Well, I guess again we all are different. So for some people maybe it can be something appealing, but for other people they just do not care about solving some equations and so on.
For me, I partially agree with everything you say, but also I feel that it's kind of a little bit not cool when they say that a woman should inspire a man and make him want her. I think it's about the interest from both sides. And also the second idea I would like to talk about is also Charlotte's. Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance. If the dispositions of the parties are ever so well known to each other or ever so similar beforehand, it does not advance their felicity in the least. They always continue to grow sufficiently unlike afterwards to have their share of vexation, and it is better to know as little as possible of the defects of the person with whom you are to pass your life.
Yeah, I also remember this phrase. I think in real life and especially nowadays, it's better to know person really well before you get married with him or her. I kind of understand why she says these words. Because if you really know a person well and you can see a lot of moments that you do not like, but you are not connected with this person somehow, and you just can leave anytime you want. But maybe when you are married, you try to fix it, you try to work on it, and you try to work on your relationship, and especially those times I'm not sure that they could divorce. That's why, so you are to spend the whole life with one person. That's why you should do something with it. And if you know a lot of things about this person, probably you would never get married.
I agree that of course we should remember about the times this story is about, and that at those times most girls were married because they had to, and at those times I think it was more preferable not to know about the drawbacks of your partner, especially if they lived in a big house. They could live in separate rooms and see each other maybe only when they eat. I think it was kind of natural for those times, and yes, that's okay. But nowadays I agree that we better know the drawbacks and decide for ourselves, and I think it's much better when you can choose if you want to marry someone or not. It's much better than if you can't.
Of course.
And the last episode that I would like to discuss with you is, okay, so those are words of Miss Bingley. A woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And besides all this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved. What do you think about it?
Of course, I do not agree with this phrase. Because you must do whatever you want to do. That's the only criteria for choosing the way you behave. But actually, this phrase is still true. Of course, it's not about music and dancing and what was that?
Drawing,
like manner of walking and something like that. But a woman should be capable of doing so many things. So she needs to work, she needs to have children and to raise them, to spend time on them, to spend money on them, and also
additionally
clean her house and do some household chores, and yes, again, work and work and work. And I think it's not fair, of course, because too many things are demanded from us.
Yes, this is what I wanted to say, that to deserve the word, you should do this, and this. And I have the only question. What a man must have to deserve the word?
Just money.
Yeah, just money.
So I think that to deserve a word, we should be born. That's it. So
Great.
if I'm in this world, of course I deserve a word. Why not?
Yeah. Okay, so anything else you would like to discuss?
Well, I just want to say that finally I love the language of the book. Yes, it's a little bit challenging because there are a lot of words that I do not know, but I love challenges when I like the book. Yes, so I should say this. And I really enjoy this kind of old-fashioned way to make sentences, but still I can understand them, so it's not that bad, so it's not too old-fashioned for me. That's why I really love the language of this book, and I also love the humor, because here it's kind of subtle humor, but still we have some. So when Jane Austen describes Mr. Bennet, the thing is I am a little bit confused just because they have Mr., Miss, Mrs., and they do not use a lot of names. Just for Elizabeth and children. Yes, for children, okay, I can differentiate them easily. But Miss, Mrs., and I'm just reading, and then I start to realize, was it a man or a woman? Who said that? Was it Mr. or Mrs.? I do not understand.
And then they call someone by the name, and you're so like,
who is that?
Who is it?
I like the way she depicts Mr. Bennet, even though I do not like him as a character. I still like some kind of humor here, and also Mr. Hurst, who is the man who thinks only about eating and
sleeping.
Yes, and sleeping. And also I love the description of Miss Bingley, because she is a really mean and rude woman.
Very.
But yeah, so the description is quite nice. Well, for me, I love it.
About the language, I would like to add that for me, guys, it is quite difficult to read. Sometimes I read a passage and there is kind of a blank in my head, and I'm like, I need to reread it. What was going on? What happened? And mostly I came across a lot of words that are unknown to me, or the words that I know but they were used in a different meaning, and I should also check it. That's why reading takes quite a lot of time for me. So okay, let's move to the vocabulary. Okay, will you start?
Okay, the first word I have is the word let, because it is used in a strange meaning for me, in a new meaning for me. To let means to rent in the following context. My dear Mr. Bennet, said his lady to him one day, have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last? Mr. Bennet replied that he had not.
Okay. My first phrase is to turn the tide, which means to reverse the course of events, especially from one extreme to another. The gentleman pronounced him to be a fine figure of a man. The ladies declared he was much handsomer than Mr. Bingley, and he was looked at with great admiration for about half the evening, till his manners gave a disgust, which turned the tide of his popularity, for he was discovered to be proud, to be above his company, and above being pleased, and not all his large estate in Derbyshire could then save him from having a most forbidding, disagreeable countenance, and being unworthy to be compared with his friend.
Next phrase, in a chaise and four. It is a carriage pulled by 4 horses. It's pretty clear from the context, so that it probably is this thing, but as I was not sure, I decided to check.
Good. Next phrase is to vouch for, means to say that you know from experience that something is true or good, or that someone is honest and has a good character. No, said Darcy, I have made no such pretension. I have faults enough, but they are not, I hope, of understanding. My temper I dare not vouch for. It is, I believe, too little yielding, certainly too little for the convenience of the world. I cannot forget the follies and vices of others so soon as I ought, not their offenses against myself. My feelings are not puffed about with every attempt to move them. My temper would perhaps be called resentful. My good opinion once lost is lost forever.
The next, it's not a phrase, but it was just a sentence, and I didn't really catch the meaning. The sentence is, she times them ill. So ill in this case means badly, and it was say about coughing. Kitty has no discretion in her coughs, said her father, she times them ill. So meaning she coughs at times when it would be better not to.
Unsuitable.
Yes.
My next abstract has two words and phrases. The first is a word, an entail, the act of entailing, and to entail means to create a legal condition that property can only be passed to particular people, for example, only to an oldest son. And the second phrase is to rail against, which means to criticize someone severely or angrily, especially for personal failings. Jane and Elizabeth tried to explain to her the nature of an entail. They had often attempted to do it before, but it was a subject on which Mrs. Bennet was beyond the reach of reason, and she continued to rail bitterly against the cruelty of settling an estate away from a family of 5 daughters in favor of a man whom nobody cared anything about.
My phrase is by design, according to plan, or by intention. Your plan is a good one, replied Elizabeth, where nothing is in question but the desire of being well married, and if I were determined to get a rich husband or any husband, I dare say I should adopt it. But these are not Jane's feelings. She is not acting by design.
Design was one of the words. I was like, design? What a modern word, and they used it at those times. What is the meaning? Yes. Okay, my next abstract also has two phrases. The first one is to heal the breach, which means make an unfriendly situation friendly again. And the second is at variance, which means not being in agreement or harmony. The abstract is: the disagreement subsisting between yourself and my late honored father always gave me much uneasiness, and since I have had the misfortune to lose him, I have frequently wished to heal the breach. But for some time I was kept back by my own doubts, fearing lest it might seem disrespectful to his memory for me to be on good terms with anyone with whom it had always pleased him to be at variance.
And the next one, by way of. It means as a type of. You are a very strange creature by way of a friend, always wanting me to play and sing before anybody and everybody.
Yeah, I remember this phrase, but I didn't write it out. My last phrase is to fall short of, which means to fail to reach an amount of standard that was expected or hoped for, causing disappointment. He had not been long seated before he complimented Mrs. Bennet on having so fine a family of daughters, said he had heard much of their beauty, but that in this instance fame had fallen short of the truth, and added that he did not doubt her seeing them all in due time disposed of in marriage. Disposed of also sounds rude, don't you think?
Yeah. Okay, I have some more words. So the one of them is extort. Again, I came across this word a lot of times, but I still do not remember what it means. So it means to get something by force or threats or with difficulty. She did at last extort from her father an acknowledgement that the horses were engaged. The next one, a draft. I know this word, but in a different meaning. And in the book it was a medicine in the form of a liquid which you drink. But this word is old-fashioned.
Yes.
The apothecary came and, having examined his patient, said, as might be supposed, that she had caught a violent cold and that she must endeavor to get the better of it, advised her to return to bed and promised her some draughts.
Okay. Anything else?
One more phrase.
Yes.
Do its office, it means do its job, perform the task it was supposed to perform. Yes, and her petticoat. I hoped you saw her petticoat 6 inches deep in mud. I am absolutely certain. And the gown, which had been let down to hide it not doing its office. Well, some of these phrases are actually quite understandable from the context again, but I just decided to write them out.
Anything else to add on this part?
Well, I think no.
No. Okay, guys, thanks very much for joining. Next time we're going to continue discussing this book. Please join us. All our contacts are in the description box below. Thanks for watching and live long and
Remember that good opinion once lost is lost forever.
bye-bye.
Goodbye.
I know that she was not born. Okay. Это все.
Sense and sensibility.
Yes, sensibility.
Да.
You still couldn't be like very much уважать.
Respected.
Okay, so let's start. Подожди, давай сейчас они выйдут.
Spending more time with Mr. Darcy. Сейчас. Неправильно.
They go with her sisters to marathon. Чё? They go with her sisters to marathon. Кто they? Okay. What else? This is this exact moment. Blah blah blah. And it is better to know as little as possible. Okay.
Must have.
Must have.
Я просто хотела посмотреть, какой глагол именно был использован. Mr. Bennett. Сейчас. Вспомню, кто есть кто.
Беннет, Бингли.
Нет.
Абстракт?
Ой, у меня нет.
Нет абстракта?
Я забыла про него.
Ладно.
No abstract.
No
just.
Okay, my next... Сегодня прям проходной двор. The disagreement but for some time I was kept back by my own doubt, her seeing them all in due time, and added that he did not doubt her seeing them all in due time disposed of in marriage. Okay.
Не хочу это читать.
Так, countenance, выражение лица. Countenance, самообладание.
Endeavor. Так, ладно, попробуем.
Thank you very much for... нам нужна фраза.
Remember that good opinion once lost. Просто так долго говоришь, что забываю. Good opinion once lost is lost forever.
Давай, все, я сейчас только короткую скажу, да.